Okay, Kalispera says. Good evening, everyone. Greetings. Thanks for braving the cold weather and coming to tonight's event. Winter has definitely arrived. Just before we commence, just a few household items. The Friday at the Greek, the music nights have already started. They've been going for a couple of weeks now. There's an event tomorrow. I think there are still some vacancies. We also have the Erotic Ensemble the following week as well. So virtually every Friday evening at the mezzanine level, look out for the music nights that are occurring at the premises. Now, with respect to our seminars, the next seminar is part of the series by Phil Kefkaludis is actually next Thursday. We've also got a special seminar on Cyprus on Tuesday the 25th. Okay, by George Kazamias. It's a joint event with the Greek Studies program at La Trobe University. So if you're on our email list, you'll get the notification. So next Tuesday, 7 p.m. at the mezzanine level, there's a lecture on Cyprus by Professor George Kazamias at the mezzanine level. And just... No, there'll be Thursday lecture. There's a normal Thursday lecture, Phil Kefkalidis. It's an additional lecture. So there's 2 seminars next week, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday. Okay? Furthermore, just for your notification, we do now have in stock, you all remember Catherine Gauci, who wrote The Embroiderer. We have her latest book, The Carpet Weaver of Ushak, available for sale. So we've brought in a few copies today as well. So for those who enjoyed The Embroiderer, you'll definitely will enjoy this title as well. So just from the bookshop at the back. I think that's about all with respect to announcements. So the following Thursday, next week we've got 2 seminars. After the following Thursday, we've got a 2-week break, and then we return sort of mid-July. Okay, tonight's seminar, a multicultural Epirus, populations, languages and education during the last years of the Ottoman Empire. And we'd like to thank the sponsors of tonight's seminar, the Pan-Epiriotic Federation of Australia. So thank you. Ευχαριστούμε για τη χορηγία των Επιρώτικο Σύλλογο. And the subject will be about Epirus during the time period of the first half of the 19th century until the end of the Balkan Wars. In 1912, Epirus was incorporated into the modern Greek state. So that's the time period that the speaker will be covering. It also includes the reign of Ali Pasha as well, and especially the city of Ioannina. It was quite a dynamic city where a lot of economic activity was taking place and a lot of different ethnic groups were involved in that activity. Multiple languages were spoken as well, and our speaker will describe and cover that diversity that was occurring in Epirus in the 19th century. To give the presentation, we have with us Dr. Themistoklis Papadopoulos, all the way from Greece, all the way from Ioannina. He's here to take part in the Modern Greek Studies Conference that's occurring starting at Flinders University tomorrow, the biennial conference that's been organised by Michalis Tsanika the last sort of 20 years. So we thought, since he's going to be in Australia, let's bring him over to Melbourne as well. This is his sort of second visit to Australia. I said he's from Epirus. However, his postgraduate studies, his PhD studied, was done in France at Sorbonne. It was actually in linguistics. And it's a pity we don't have him here a few more days, because he's quite easy have given a lecture, a seminar on his the book that he's recently published on linguistic policies in modern Greece, and I know that's something that it would interest a lot of you. It would cover that debate between the Modiki Katharevosa and a lot of other linguistic changes that have occurred in Greece. But maybe next time you're here, Themistoklis, we can get you to cover that topic as well. So a big round of applause for our speaker tonight, Themistoklis Papadopoulos, all the way from Ioannina.
It's okay. Everybody can hear me. Okay. First of all, I have to thank you for inviting me. Here is the second time for me in Australia, but the first in Melbourne. And I will start by a question. Do we have people from Epirus here, I suppose? Oh. So, I have a subject about Epirus. So, a few words. You all know about Epirus, but I will start with some about geography and history. That's Epirus during the late Ottoman Empire. So it's a mountainous region in the western Balkan Peninsula, neighboring with Thessaly and Macedonia in the east, central Greece in the south, Albania in the north, and the Ionian Sea in the west. It was inhabited by Greek tribes during the antiquity, who created the Republic of Epirus, then the Kingdom of Epirus, and then during the Byzantine period, the Despotate of Epirus, that existed until the end of the Middle Ages. During the Ottoman period, we are about to examine in the present study, Epirus was a big province which included also regions of Albania like Skoder and Duris, Skodra and Dirachio in Greek. It was a much bigger Epirus than it is today. The Ottoman administration used the vilayet system, consisted by territorial subdivisions controlled by the Pasha, who were submitted to the Sultan. The vilayet of Ioannina at that time included many regions of Albania, Macedonia, and Thessaly. The most important government which had a significant role for the period we are about to examine was the Ali Pasha period, from the late 18th century until 1822. So Ali Pasha Tepelenli, that man here, was a soldier from Albanian background. Tepelenli means he was from Tepeleni, who became Pasha of Ioannina at the end of the 18th century, and during his period he declared the autonomous Pashalik of Ioannina, a non-recognized independent state, what we call today a ghost state. So Ali Pasha, in order to maintain his power, tried to create new alliances with Christian Western European kingdoms. In popular literature, you all know he's presented as an inhuman and cruel despot. But compared to the other Ottoman rulers of his time, he was more open to the West, and he offered more justice and freedom to the international trading, the private initiative, the religion, and the education to all the population of his territories. Consequently, an amelioration of the economy, culture, and education started to appear among the populations of different language, nation, and religion in Epirus. And this situation of economic prosperity continued for long after Ali Pasha's assassination until the Balkan Wars in the beginning of the 20th century. During the period from the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, the geopolitical situation of the Ottoman Empire was very agitated. In the territories of Macedonia was a revolt of the Greek populations. Most important figure was the Lieutenant Pavlos Melas. And also Bulgarians and Serbians were in conflict with the Greeks and the Turks of the collapsing Ottoman Empire. And many populations were under constant movement. So Epirus was in a relatively calm situation at that time, considered as a poor region with no agriculture and no other economic opportunities, unlike the Macedonian territories. So it's like today, nobody cares about Epirus. Nothing changed. So this is a statue of Ali Pasha in northern Epirus, in Tepeleni. That's why the inscription is it's in his birthplace, in Tepeleni. That's why the inscription is in Albanian. So the Ottoman Empire, despite its despotism, was very tolerant to different religions and languages, and each community had a different educational system. And it is important to note that in the 19th century, the language was not an important element to specify a nation. The different populations were separated according to their religion. In Epirus, during the last years of the Ottoman rule, there were 5 different communities: the Greeks, the Turks, the Jews, the Albanians, and the Vlachs, who had many linguistic, cultural, and religious differences. Some of them disappeared due to geopolitical events which followed the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Some of them survive until today. So we will start by the Greeks, were the most important community. It was the biggest and the most active population in Epirus during the last year of the Ottoman period. They had the most well-organized educational system in Epirus, which was even better than the national one of the independent southern Greece. You see, this is the famous Bridge of Arta. You all know from popular songs. But at the time, it was the border. It was the customs. In the middle of the bridge, it was the border between Greece and Ottoman Empire. As Evros is today, Arachthos was at the time the border. This is the river. So, the Greeks were living in almost all the big urban centers, in all the areas of Epirus. There were many important reasons for the development of the education inside the Greek community. The first one, and the most important, was the work of the benefactors. This fact goes back to the Ali Pasha's governance at the end of the 18th century, who gave more motivation to the private initiative and trading. Many Greek businessmen managed to expand their affairs and business to other countries, and they made many important donations to their places of origin in Epirus by building schools, orphanages, libraries, and other educational establishments. And it is important to say that more than 90% of the benefactors of Greece had their origins from Epirus. The most important economic and educational and cultural center at that time was Ioannina, who had the biggest number of Greek language schools. This is how was Ioannina at that time. The Greek Orthodox community of the city had an autonomy to elect her own representatives and to organize an educational system and a teaching of the Greek language. At the end of the 19th century, some special committees were created in order to control and invest the money offered by the many benefactors for educational purposes. The most important among the Greek benefactors was the banker Georgios Stavros from Klimatia. He was the founder of the Bank of Greece. He created in Ioannina many banks and the biggest orphanage of Epirus. The Zosimas brothers from Rameno were the most important contributors to the development of the education inside the Greek community. Results of their heritage were one famous college, the Zosimea School, one academy for teachers, and the municipal library. Other important benefactors were Zois Kaplanis from Grameno, Apostolos Arsakis and Christakis Zographos from northern Epirus, and the Papazoglou family from Ioannina. The schools and other establishments were controlled by the Greek Orthodox Committee, and the language used in the school lessons was the Greek. However, it is important to note that these schools were not exclusively for Greeks. They were also accessible to Muslims and other non-Greek speakers. After 1876, Turkish was also taught in these schools as a second language. During the period of 1890-1913, more than 500 Greek language schools were in Epirus with more than 20,000 students of all levels. Another important factor for the development of the Greek education in Epirus were the activities of the consular agencies of the Greek kingdom who supported the Greek Orthodox communities. Don't forget that except Arta, all the rest of Epirus was Ottoman Empire. So there were some consular agencies. In Epirus there were 3, in Ioannina, Preveza, and in Gyrocaster. The one of Gjirokastra is the only one who still exists, because it's in Albanian territory now. After 1870, because of the national awakening of the other Balkan nations, a priority was given to these consulates by the Greek state, and at the end of the 19th century, they tried to obtain the support of the other Christian populations of the area against the collapsing Ottoman Empire. During the short 1897 war with Turkey, and during the revolts in Macedonia, they had the role of peacekeepers in Epirus, and while secretly helping the Greek rebels by collecting money and even recruiting volunteers to fight at their side. Their role was much more significant for the Greek education of Epirus because they helped and support the local educational Greek schools in periods of crisis during the 19th century. And another fact that helped the development of Greek education was without a doubt, the nature of the Greek language, which was the oldest among all the spoken languages in Epirus. It had the grammar rules, literature since the antiquity. That's why it became easily the dominant languages in science and education at that time. In the Greek schools of Epirus, modern educational methods were used, and the schools were free to choose their own manuals, since there were no national educational system for the Greek language there. The favorite book, in fact, was the grammar of Emmanuel Chrysoloras, who was considered as the most modern of that time. Chrysoloras, Emmanuel Chrysoloras. The second community were the Turks. They were also living in big urban centers like Ioannina, and a large majority of them were working in the administration sector, the army and the police. Despite the conflicts with the Greeks and the other Christian populations in the Balkans, the relations between Greeks and Turks in Epirus were relatively calm during the last years of the Ottoman Empire. The Turks had their own educational system with many schools, mostly in Ioannina. In these schools, Islamic religion was taught and Turkish language was used in all the lessons. These schools were accessible only to Turkish origin Muslim students. However, many students from Turkish origins went to Greek schools like the well-known Zosimea College, and they received a Greek education based to the Western models. Many of them were coming from rich families and the rich Ottoman nobility of Epirus. Among them, the most well-known was the painter Kenan Mesare, nephew of Hasan Taskhin Pasha, who was the last Ottoman governor of Salonika. And he was also graduate from Zosimea. And the Mesare family received a Greek education, and they were speaking fluently Greek. The Turkish population survived in Epirus until the exchange of the populations of 1923. However, many Turks, including Esat Pasha, the last governor of Ioannina, who also received a Greek education in the Zosimea College, maintained contact with their places of origin, and some of them visited regularly Epirus during the following years. Even some of the Mesare's descendants converted to Christianity in order to stay in Epirus after the departure of the Turks. In fact, one of his sons, I say that for, if we have from Ioannina, people, Inis Mesare, who passed away recently, was a notable architect in Ioannina. And today, 2 streets of Ioannina are dedicated to Turks born and raised in Epirus, the Kenan Mesare Street and the Esat Pasha Street. It's a little unusual to find, to see a street dedicated to the last Ottoman governor. The Turkish language did not totally disappear from Epirus. After 1923, the exchange of the population between the two countries was based to the religion and not the nation or the language. So many Christian Turkish speakers had to move to Greece, and they were sent mostly to northern regions like Macedonia. In Epirus, they were sent mostly to Thesprotia and Preveza regions in order to reinforce the Christian populations, because many Albanian Muslims, we will talk later about them, were still living there during the 1930s. In new towns like Nea Selefkia outside of Igoumenitsa and Bafra outside of Ioannina, the Turkish language is still spoken and even understood by a few elderly persons. And then the Jews. The Jewish community of Epirus was among the oldest of the Jewish diaspora in the world. This population was different from the famous Spanish Sephardic Jews of Salonika. They came to Greece probably during late antiquity. In Epirus, more than 500 Jews were living mostly in Ioannina, and there was also a smaller community coming from Ioannina and Corfu was installed in Paramithia, in Thesprotia at the end of the 19th century. The Jews of Epirus were mostly known as Romaniotes, and they were speaking a Greek dialect named Yevanic. It was the only Greek origin dialect which was written with a different alphabet, the Hebraic. Although they had a different religion, they were more attached to the Christians than the Muslims. They had a separate educational system ruled by notable Jews and rabbis of Ioannina under the supervision of the Alliance Israélite Universelle, an international pre-war Jewish organization of French influence. In their schools, the Greek language was used, and there were also lessons about Jewish religions and Hebrew alphabets. A big number of newspapers and magazines were published at that time using both alphabets, Greek and Hebrew. Many notable Jews of Ioannina decided to study in Greek schools because of their high reputation at the time. The most well-known was the poet Yosef Elia. The Jews of Ioannina obtained Greek citizenship right after the annexation of Epirus to Greece in 1913. And after the departure of the Muslims, after the Lausanne Treaty, the Jews became the biggest religious minority in Greece. They kept the same separate educational system during the following years with very few changes. And the Jewish community survived until World War II, when most of the Jews were exterminated during the Holocaust. The synagogues were destroyed and the schools were definitely closed. Many survivors after the war moved to Israel. Today, the Jewish community of Ioannina still exists, but it counts less than 100 persons. Only one synagogue works occasionally, and the Yevanic dialect is totally disappeared, as it happened with Ladino and all the Jewish languages of Europe, who were counting many millions of speakers before the Holocaust. And among the last surviving Romagnot Jews of Ioannina is the newly elected mayor Moisis Elisaf. The Vlachs. The Vlachs, or Aromanians, this is the official nomination by the Council of Europe, called Aromanians, are a linguistic minority speaking a Latin origin dialect close to the Romanian. The oldest sources we have about their appearance in Epirus are from the late Byzantine period, but according to the author Panagiotis Aravandinos, the Vlachs are descendants of Roman tribes who came from Dacia, today Romania. That's why if we have people from Ioannina here, maybe you know the word Datskos. It's from that origin. So they were living in mountain areas around Ioannina, and their most important languages and cultural centers in Epirus were Metsovo, Sirako, Koritsa, and Moschopolis in northern Epirus. And despite the common opinion who thinks the Vlach language as a dialect without a writing system only for oral use, Vlach was already written since the 18th century, and many grammars, glossaries, and liturgical texts were circulated mostly in Epirus. Many Greek and foreign authors wrote about the presence of the Vlachs in Epirus during the 19th century, especially the French diplomat François de Bouqueville, who was invited in Epirus by Ali Pasha before the Greek Revolution. In his book, A Trip to Greece, he mentions the presence of more than 40,000 Christian Albanians and Vlachs living in the Ali Pasha state. But the most important witness about the Vlachs of Epirus during the last year of the Ottoman Empire was the poet Kostas Kristallis. Around 1890, he wrote a study titled The Vlachs of Pindos, published partially in some local newspapers and literary magazines in 1894, and the complete book was published post-mortem by his brother before the Balkan Wars in 1912. The particularity of Kristallis comparing to other authors of his time is that he was himself a Vlach. So we have a testimony from inside the Vlach community about their culture and language. And Kristallis separates the Vlachs into three categories: the Karagunides, who were living in Thessaly, the Vlachs of Samarina, who were living in Macedonia, and the Vlachs of Pindos, who were living in Epirus, and they were the biggest and the most culturally active community, counting more than 100,000 persons. And the separation made by Christalis was based to their linguistic differences, and it's still used today by linguists and ethnologists. The study of Christalis contains many traditional poems, songs, and proverbs written directly in Vlach language with the use of the Latin alphabet. So he can be considered as the founder of Vlach literature in modern Greece. He also revealed that in his birthplace, Sirako, the Vlach language was used at school and during the liturgy in the local church. During the period preceding the Balkan Wars, the Vlach population was used by Romanian propaganda as an instrument of the Romanian national awakening in the Balkans. In 1905, the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid recognized them as Romanians and permitted the creation of local Vlach schools with manuals and books coming from Romania. These schools were not recognized by the Patriarchate of Constantinople, and they had no support from the many local benefactors of Epirus who were Vlachs. It is important to say that the Vlachs, despite the linguistic differences, was the population who remained closest to the Greek nation. Many of the most important benefactors like Mihail Tositsas or Evangelis Zappas were of Vlach origin, but they had a Greek national conscience and they financed the foundation of the Greek language schools in Epirus. The Vlach schools continued to exist after the Balkan Wars, but they were active mostly in Samarina, located in Macedonia, not in Epirus, which contains the biggest population of Vlachs. After World War II, all the Vlach schools were closed due to the entrance of Romania into the Iron Curtain, but the Vlachs continued to practice their language. In 1997, their language was recognized as being among the endangered languages by the Council of Europe, who recommended to the Balkan states to take measures for the survival of the language and the culture. In our days, lessons of Vlach language and culture are given by the many Vlach associations in Greece, which counts more than 100,000 subscribed members. Many cultural events like the annual Landamoma are organized, and Metsovo still remains one of the most important Vlach cultural and language centers in the Balkans. Now, the Albanians. The Albanian language speakers of Epirus were originary of two different communities. Their major difference had to do with the religion. The first community, the smaller, were known as the Arvanites, who were Orthodox Christian. In Epirus, they were located in the regions of Thesprotia and Preveza, mostly in villages around Suli. According to Aravandinos, in a study based to the lists of the local Orthodox parishes at the end of the 19th century, 74,000 Albanian language speakers were living in southern Epirus. Their language was used mostly for trading affairs with the Albanian Christians without ever having a writing system. The Arvanites had from the beginning a negative perception about the use of their language, and they never claimed any separate education system. Their use of the Albanian language was not an obstacle for them to be considered as Greeks and to belong to the Greek nation. After the annexation of Epirus to Greece, they became Greek citizens and they continued to practice their language. During the following years, they were assimilated with the Greeks and the Arvanite dialect progressively disappeared. The reasons were the urbanization of the Greek society, the immigration too, but also the interruption of all diplomatic relations with Albania after World War II. Today, the Arvanite is spoken only by some elderly persons in mountain villages in Epirus and also in southern Greece. But the case of the Albanian Muslims was totally different. Although they were speaking the same language with the Arvanites of Epirus, they had very bad relations with the Greeks and all the Christian communities. Their majority was living in northern Epirus. In the south, more than 20,000 Albanian Muslims were located in Preveza and mostly in Thesprotia in villages around the Kalamas River. They were known as Chams or Albanochamides. From the Albanian word Chameria, it means the region around Kalamas, and probably from the ancient word Thiamiria, was what we call Thesprotia today, all the region around Kalamas River. And They never accepted the Greek national and cultural identity. At the end of the 19th century, they were the majority among the Muslim populations of Epirus. And although they were speaking the Albanian language, and they used to go to the Turkish schools, only the rich families could learn Albanian in private lessons. It is important to note that among all the communities of Epirus, at that time, the Cham Muslims always had the highest rank of illiteracy. This situation continued even after the Balkan Wars, when Thesprotia and Preveza became Greek territories. During that period, Greece had to recognize them as an ethnic Albanian minority, and they were not included to the exchange of the populations with Turkey. That year, 9 Albanian language schools were created only for Muslim students in Preveza and Thesprotia. Certainly, this number seems very small for a population of more than 20,000 persons, but it proves that the high level of illiteracy continued to exist even after the Balkan Wars, mostly because of the difficulty of the Muslims to be adapted to Christian Western societies. Thesprotia was the last region of Epirus where the Ottoman model of multiculturalism continued to exist until World War II. During that period, the Chams became allies of the Italian and German occupation forces. A militia of Muslim soldiers was created in Thesprotia, accused for many war crimes and atrocities against the Greek and Jewish populations. In summer of 1944, Epirus passed to the control of the resistance forces of Edes, who forced the Chams to leave Epirus in less than 3 months and move to Albania. In 1953, the Albanian communist regime gave them the Albanian citizenship, and they were installed in Greek-speaking regions of northern Epirus in order to reinforce the Albanian Muslim population. They were the only religious and linguistic minority in Greece who collaborated openly with the occupants and had the worst relations with the Greek and the other local populations. After the fall of the communists in 1990, some Cham organizations protested against Greece and claimed their return to Epirus and reimbursement of their lost fortune. From the Greek side, they are always considered as war criminals, and today we can affirm that this subject is definitely closed because the youngest of the Chams born in Greece must be more than 75 years old. The Cham villages were colonized by Greek population from mountainous villages of Epirus. They obtained Greek names and very few traces of mosques and other buildings show in our days that an Albanian Muslim community existed there until World War II. Some of them, for example, it was the village of Murto in the Ionian coast, who became Sivota. It obtained an ancient name. The ancient location of Sivota was in the village of Sayada, but they had to give a Greek name. So, because of the bad relations with this population, and mostly because of the crimes committed during the occupation, the population of Thesprotia didn't want to keep any Muslim Albanian cultural heritage in their territories, which is normal. On the opposite, with the Turks and the Jews who had their origins from Ioannina, there were no successful attempts of any cultural approach between the Greeks and the descendants of the Cham community of Thesprotia the years that followed. So, Epirus in our days and the heritage of that time. So, the Greek language and education was dominant during the Ottoman period, and after the annexation of Epirus to the Kingdom of Greece, the Greek became the official language, and the high level of education offered by the schools was maintained during the following years. The years that followed the late Ottoman period had a significant role for the different populations. We saw that many of them disappeared, like the Jews, the Turks, the Albanians. The only remaining people of that time are the Vlachs, who still practice the language, but comparing to the early 20th century, their cultural and language sites are more limited. The entrance of many immigrants from Albania after 1990 didn't help for a revival of the Arvanite language, because the Albanian immigrants moved to big urban centers in the south and in the islands where it was easier to find a job. Consequently, Epirus, despite her proximity to the Albanian border, has less Albanian immigrants than other places in Greece. In 2016, newly introduced immigrants and refugees from the Middle East moved to Greece, and the government had to take them to places inside the Greek continent. In Epirus, 2 centers of refugees were created, in Konica and in Ioannina. Certainly the situation is unclear about the future of this small population in Epirus, and it's too early to have precise information about their exact number and their language situation, but there is a probability to see during the following years a new population of Arabic language with a totally different culture living in Epirus. Northern Epirus became in 1914 an Albanian territory, but the Greek Orthodox community still remains active, and it's the biggest Greek-speaking community in the Balkan states with more than 200,000 Greek native speakers. Their language is recognized and taught in Greek schools in villages around Sarandi, Gyrocaster, and Himara. And the collapse of the communists in Albania gave opportunity to the Greek state and to the private initiative to help for the foundation of Greek minority schools where it was needed. A more important fact for the language is that the cultural contact between the Greeks and the Greek community of Albania, interrupted for almost 50 years, is now possible, and the new generation can learn and speak Greek easier than their parents. In Epirus, the heritage of the benefactors was determinant for the survival and even the domination of the Greek culture in the 19th century, but it still remains in everything that concerns the education. Today, 80%, even more, the schools of Ioannina have the name of the benefactors who helped for their foundation. During the last year, many schools and new installations like Zosimea, thanks to the money still coming from the heritage of benefactors, were created. New educational establishments are still created, with more recent example, the Arsakio School of Ioannina, created by the Arsakis Foundation 6 years ago. Epirus is a unique case in Greek education because of the contribution of the benefactors who helped the Greek language to survive in difficult times, but also many other communities, even the Turks, to have a cultural and language contact with the Greeks. And I have some images to show you of that time. Here we see, for those of Ioannina, it's the local saint. But as you noticed in the icon, this is one of the very rare Christian icons who has a mosque right behind. A Christian icon with a Muslim mosque. This is Georgios Stavru, one of the most important benefactors, the founder of the Bank of Greece. This is an old banknote of 5 drachmas with a portrait of Georgios Stavru. This is the orphanage. Today is not an orphanage anymore. It is the siege of the direction of all the colleges and the lyceums in Ioannina, the higher, the secondary education. Όχι, είναι το Μέγαρο Γεωργίου Σταύρου, λίγο πιο κάτω από το γυαλί καφενέ. It was recently restored. That's, the photo was taken in April. It was me who took it. It's right after the restoration. This is the Kaplanion school, as it is today. It hasn't changed for much. It's still remains one of the most important schools of Ioannina. This is one of the Zosimas brothers, Anastasios Zosimas. There were 7 brothers. This one is, who is this one? I think it's Nikolaos. This is Zosimea school as it was at the time we were about to exam. And this is how it is today, hasn't changed for much. This is also the only difference is the paintings on the wall. That hasn't changed for much. And this is the library as it is today. This is also a school created by the Zosimas brothers, is totally unknown. It is located in their birthplace, Grameno. It is also a school created by the Zosimas brothers. And it still works. It has 5 students, I think. But it's a totally unknown school of the Zosimas Foundation. This was the place that the academy, the Zosimea Academy, before the creation, it was a mosque. It was right after the departure of the Muslims. The mosque was destroyed. There were 17 mosques in Ioannina. There are only 4 who still survive today. And this is the Papazoglou school. It was a college for many years. Now it's a primary school. In the beginning, it was an embroidery school. This was the military academy. It had a significant role in modern Greek history, this building. This was built by Ali Pasha. And it was a military school, and many Greek who contribute to the revolution, like Kolokotronis himself, studied for a while to this school. This was the Turkish school. This is a photo of the inauguration of the Turkish school of the late. It was a school for girls. The school, and this is how it is today. The post office in Ioannina. This is the clock tower, how it was. And this is one of the last Ottoman inscriptions. They had the old Arabic alphabet at the time. It's in the clock tower in Ioannina. This was the Ottoman library. It's under restoration now. I don't know what they will do. They want to make a museum, but I don't know what they want to do. And this is one of the last Ottoman inscriptions, the coat of arms here of the Sultan, and this is right in the entrance of the castle in Ioannina. And this is an Ottoman inscription of the last of an old Ottoman cemetery inside the castle in Ioannina, and some old Ottoman tombs. This is Kenan Mesare. And this painting, you all know, it's a famous painting. It's the Crown Prince Constantine who enters to Ioannina, but very few persons know that this was painted by a Turk, by Kenan Mesare. It was a Turk who painted this famous painting. This is a Jewish inscription of the. It's in the museum, the municipal museum of Ioannina. This was a Jewish school. It's abandoned today. One of the, some of them were burned. This is an old Jewish school that still remains, but it's abandoned. This was also a Jewish school. It's not in use anymore. They are all located near the old town of Ioannina. This is an old Jewish house. And also another Jewish house of the very few remaining traces of the Jewish community of Ioannina. You see, the building is abandoned. And this is the inscription of the entrance of the last synagogue of Ioannina inside the castle. These are Vlachs from Metsovo, the traditional costume. This is Metsovo, how it was at the time. You see the text there is in French. It was before the English became a dominant language. At the time, French was the language of the diplomats. That's why the text is in French. This is Kostas Kristallis. These were the Albanian Muslims of Epirus. The photo is probably taken in Filiates. And these are the very few traces of, this is an Albanian mosque somewhere in Thesprotia. You see they are in ruins. And also this, not far from the Albanian border. And this is Ioannina, how it is today. So, are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Themistoklis, for that presentation. The floor is now open to questions. Just raise your hands and I'll come around with the mic.
You can ask me even in Greek if you like, there's no problem.
Greek, Albanian, Vlach, whatever language.
No, only Greek.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation tonight. You gave us a lot of new information that we didn't know very much about. I appreciate that. Is there any evidence whatsoever that Epirus was started by the son of Achilles named Pyrrhus, who had married Andromache after the Trojan War, and they went there and they established the principality of Epirus?
According to the legend, Andromache
It's only
went
legend.
there. We don't know for sure.
No trace of evidence there.
No, in fact, we have many traces of...
Pyrrhus existed.
Yes, that's for sure. And his capital was not Dodoni, it was Passarona.
Passarona. Thank you.
Probably located, we don't know where exactly, it was probably located under my village, but we are not, this is not for sure.
No. Well, you probably related to Achilles as well.
Okay. Sure, there must be more questions.
Μπορείτε να αναφερθείτε, ας πούμε, στους αλβανόφωνους λογοτέχνες που γράφαν ελληνικά την περίοδο αυτή, όπως ο Ναΐμ Φρασέρι και οι άλλοι?
Yes, they were also...
Themistoklis, if you can just repeat the question in English, please.
Yes, there were some Albanian origin authors who were writing in Greek, and they also received, some of them, a Greek education. Some of them, even the journalist and the painter, the famous Dinos painter of the 30s, he was Albanian from Preveza, but they were from very rich families, all of them. And some of them went to Greek schools. The famous Dinos was Ali Dino, I think his real name. He became even a deputy in the conservative party of Dimitrios Gounaris, I think. Yeah, but they were an exception. There were very few of them, and only the very rich families.
So they weren't affiliated with the church?
No. They had all their businesses were with the Greeks.
Yes, thank you for that excellent presentation. My question is this: are the Slavs separate and distinct from the Vlachs?
Yes, they have the Slavs and the Vlachs have nothing to do. The the Slavs are Slavs. The Vlachs it's a Latin language. They have nothing. Yes, and the Romanian is a Latin language. Yes, it's a Latin language. Certainly the Vlachs came earlier. The Slavs came to the Balkans during the Middle Age. The Vlachs probably, but we don't know exactly their origins. Some of them say that they are descending of Roman tribes. This is very probable. But what we know for sure is that their language is very close to the Latin, even closer than the Italian.
My other question is, if I may ask a further question, is what is the origin of Tsamiko?
What is it? Epirotico. It's the origin. They
It's not Albanian, is it?
Yes, but it was a dance very popular in Epirus. At the time, Epirus was called a part of Epirus, in fact.
I recall listening to, by mistake, an Albanian program, and the background music was Tsamiko, and I thought it was Greek, and I turned the volume on.
Yes, it was
To my
from
amazement, it
Epirus.
wasn't.
But it was it was used by many populations at the time. It was a very popular dance. But it has its origins from Epirus and especially from Thesprotia and Preveza, who were called Tsamouria at the time.
First though.
Thank you for your most enlightening talk. I'd like to know, could you tell us about the Albanian language? Is it similar to any other language? Is it a form of a Slavic language, or what do you know about it?
It belongs to a separate family, the Albanian languages. In fact, there are two dialects, the Gegi dialect in the north, mostly spoken by the Muslims, and the Toski dialect in the south. The dialect of the Arvanites and of the Chams was the Toski dialect, but they have major differences. And one of the reasons why the Arvanite dialect could not revive in Greece is that most of the immigrants, of the Albanian immigrants, were coming from the north. And they were, sometimes it was even impossible to communicate. They were speaking the Toski dialect, and the remaining Arvanites of Greece, or the Gegi dialect was spoken by the immigrants. The Toski dialect was spoken by the very few remaining Arvanites of Greece. So it's a different language, in a different European language, Indo-European language, but in a separate family.
Can I ask one more question? It's not quite within the sphere of your talk, but in Albania today, within the borders of Albania, how would you describe the population in terms of size, Catholics, Muslims, and Orthodox?
The Catholics are in the north, in Shkodra. For example, Mother Teresa of Calcutta was from northern Albania. The Muslims are in the middle, most of them, and the Orthodox, who in their majority they're speaking Greek, are in the south. And the majority are Muslims in this country, and they have many problems now, the three communities.
You mentioned very rich families. How did they become very rich?
I don't know. How could I know?
I think mainly trade.
Maybe trading, but...
Hi, I just wanted to say what you said about Tsamiko. It is considered a Greek rhythm now.
Yeah.
I mean, Manos Hatzidakis has written
Yeah.
music that he calls Tsamiko, and I think he's certainly well informed. So I'm answering that guy's question.
Yes, he was a musician, not an ethnologist.
Hatzidakis was one of the greatest intellectuals of the 20th century in Greece, apart from being the best composer. However, so I do trust that he knows what he's saying, right? Apart from that, I wanted to ask you, what was the population of the Muslims, the Arvanites who were Muslims, the Arvanites who were Christians, and also the Vlachs, and also why and when was the Jewish school burned down?
So, the Arvanites in Epirus were Christians. The Chams were the Muslims. These were two separate communities. The Arvanites were Christian Orthodox, and the Vlachs too. As about the Jewish population, the schools were burned down by the Germans, and the synagogues too.
And what was the population of the Arvanites?
The Arvanites were not comparing to comparing to those of the southern Greece. They were not. There were few in Epirus. Only in some, because they were. They were never recorded as Arvanites, and all the researches of that time were based to the religion, not the language. So it was a little difficult to know exactly about the number of the Arvanites, because also the Greeks were Orthodox, the Vlachs too. About the Chams is different. They were Muslims, and they stayed, there were a little more than 20,000, and they stayed even after the Balkan Wars, so we have exact information about them.
Yeah, thank you. Look, thanks very much for your talk. Just on the subject of interest rates, because they're quite important in Melbourne at the moment. Was Stavros actually the only founder of the bank?
No, but he was the most important.
So why wasn't Einard, the Swiss banker, most important as well?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, I believe there were two founders, Stavros and a Swiss banker.
Yes.
Why is he not mentioned?
Because I mentioned the benefactors of Epirus. It was Greek. And in fact, I'm a distant nephew of Georgios Stavro, but I'm not proud to this relation. He gave all his money to the Greek state, nothing to his family.
Το μικρόφωνο το έχω εγώ τώρα. Το χωριό μου το ξέρεις?
Όχι.
Δρυμάδες. Εκεί γεννήθηκα. Εκεί πέρασα τα χρόνια της κατοχής, της αντίστασης και του εμφυλίου πολέμου. Και από μικρό παιδί στο χωριό μου είχα μάθει ότι περάσατε από τον τόπο αυτόν πολλοί και διάφοροι. Ορισμένοι δεν μέναν εκεί. Όλοι στο χωριό μου ήταν ελληνικής καταγωγής. Αλλά ήταν του Μπραήμι το μέρος. Το Σοκάκι, το Καλτερίμι. Οι τουρκικές λέξεις είχαν παραμείνει. Λίγο πιο πέρα είχαμε τα βλάχικα χωριά. Τα βαφτίσαμε αργότερα με ελληνικά ονόματα. Ο Μετζιδιές. Μεγάλο βλάχικο και ευημερών μέρος της Υπήρου, τώρα λέγεται Κεφαλόβρυσο. Από όσους περάσαν και φύγανε, αυτοί που παραμένουν τώρα η μεγαλύτερη, αν θέλετε, μειοψηφία στην Ήπειρο είναι οι Βλάχοι. Ναι. Όποιος πάει να ψωνίσει στο Κεφαλόβρυσο το Μετζιδιέ, θα δει ακριβώς ότι είναι δίγλωση, όχι μονάχα οι μεγάλοι, αλλά και τα παιδιά τους. Αλλά τα ελληνικά είναι η δεύτερη και ορισμένως η πρώτη γλώσσα. Πας στο Μέτσοβο κάτι το ίδιο. Τα μεγαλύτερα πανηγύρια που γίνονται όχι μονάχα στην Ήπειρο, αλλά κατεβαίνουν και στην Αθήνα οι Βλάχοι. Και να χαιρόμαστε ότι με το πέρασμα του χρόνου δεν είναι μονάχα οι κατακτητές. Είναι και η κουλτούρα που αφήνουν πίσω και με αυτό κερδίζομαι. Να μου εξηγήσει ένα πράγμα, μονάχα και το ξέρω, να το μάθουν και άλλοι. Παρόλο τους μεγάλους ευεργέτες που είχαμε στην Ήπειρο, η Ήπειρο ήταν η πιο υποαναπτυγμένη και η πιο φτωχή περιοχή της Ελλάδας ακόμα και σήμερα. Ακόμα και σήμερα. Αν δεν φύγουν τα παιδιά της να δουλέψουν κάπου αλλού, δεν το βγάζουν το μεροκάματο. Λοιπόν, πώς έχουμε το ζήτημα τους μεγάλους ευεργέτες και τους φτωχούς πολλούς.
I answer in English or in Greek? In Greek. Λοιπόν, ακριβώς αυτό που είπατε ότι ήταν πολλοί που μετανάστευσαν και είχε ένα τεράστιο αριθμό μεταναστών ήδη από τα χρόνια της Οθωμανικής Αυτοκρατορίας, οι Υπηρώτες δεν είχαν να επενδύσουν σε τίποτα άλλο εκτός από την εκπαίδευση. Ναι, ακριβώς. Δεν είχαν ούτε να καλλιεργήσουν τίποτα, άρα έπρεπε να σπουδάσουν. Γι' αυτό είχε και, ναι, ήταν φτωχή ως περιοχή και παραμένει, αλλά παραμένει ακόμα, έχει το χαμηλότερο ποσοστό αναλφαβητισμού και μέχρι σήμερα σε όλη την Ελλάδα. Αντιθέτως, το υψηλότερο το έχει μια πλούσια περιοχή, η Θεσσαλία. Ακολουθείται με μικρή διαφορά από το νομό Ηλίας και μετά ακολουθούν περιοχές πάλι πλούσιες της κεντρικής Μακεδονίας.
Μα οι πλούσιοι Υπηρώτες έκαναν τα χρήματά τους στο εξωτερικό.
Ναι. Δεν θα μπορούσαν να τα κάνουν στην Ήπειρο.
Και τα χρήματά τους από το εξωτερικό θα δαπανίσανε για ανθρωπικούς σκοπούς.
Ναι. Και η μόνη επένδυση που μπορούσε να γίνει στην Ήπειρο ήταν τα σχολεία.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about tracing family history and genealogy, and how would you go about doing that, considering the different peoples in Epirus? What would you need to do? Which is a matter of going to the local councils, the Zimi, or is it the local churches?
You mean the sources we have about the genealogy of Epirus?
And how can we trace our background and so forth?
At least for the Greeks, we have informations. They were the local parishes and also the schools who kept archives, and fortunately they were saved. About the other populations, we have no much.
I'll take two final questions. And Elizabeth?
Yep. Thank you. I was interested in how you were talking about that there was, in many cases, people sharing of different religions, but sharing their educations.
Yeah.
For example, I'm aware of the Jewish interest, particularly, wealthier Jewish people who sent their children to not only the Jewish schools, but also to French schools. And also, I just wanted to raise it because up until, let's say, the end of the Balkan War period, some of the things you said made sense in that people could, for instance, some of the Turkish speakers could speak Greek. I'm interested to know whether, for business reasons, for merchants, for traders, did it work the other way? Were there Greek speakers who, because of the long Ottoman period, there was such a long presence, did they learn to speak Turkish?
In fact, in Epirus, it was the opposite, because most of the Turkish populations were public servants.
Okay.
They work in the administration, in the army, in the police. The business was held mostly by the Greeks and the Jews of Ioannina, who were also speaking Greek.
I raise it because I know from stories within our family that, and I'm from the town of Flodina, I was born in Flodina, and my grandfather was a trader, and he had fought in the Balkan Wars. He could speak Turkish and spoke, had relations with
Yes,
Turkish
in Florina,
people.
Florina was located in Macedonia, was a different case. Yes, in that case, In Macedonia, the situation was different.
Could you just very quickly mention why?
Mention why. First of all, it's a very big region and with many populations. That's why, and all of them were assimilated. They were living together. That's why sometimes the French, they call their mixed salad Macédoine de fruits. I don't know if it exists in English.
Yes, it does. It does, yes.
Yeah. It's not Epirus, the free.
But was that to do with the administration? Was that to do with
the geography and the situation in Macedonia? It's a rich place. Epirus was not. Nobody cared about Epirus.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, we'll finish off with one final question.
A question about the Greek women in that period. Am I correct in saying that Ali Pasha had amongst his harem of Greek wives? His sons were half Greek, and what was the power and the position of those women?
He had many wives, and some of them were Greek. They are two, in fact, the most well-known. Kira Frosini, the famous one who cheated Ali Pasha, and that's why he drowned her in the lake. But she, in the harem, in fact, yeah. But
acquaintance, female acquaintance, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. But the other one, Kira Vasiliki, at the time she gave money, she financed the Greek revolution. At the time she helped many Greeks of the south of the Peloponnese who were under revolt. The Turkish army of the Peloponnese was in Ioannina. Ioannina was under siege. That's why, because you all know the Greek revolution didn't start in Peloponnese. It started in the north. Ypsilantis was in Moldavia, in Moldova. If Peloponnese became the free Greek independent state, was because it was empty by the army. The army was in Epirus fighting Ali Pasha, so they had the rebels had the time to win and to establish the Greek state. In fact, they had Ali Pasha was he had harem. He was not. He was a typical Ottoman governor, like all others in this. They had many women.
I think Ali Pasha deserves a separate seminar on his. Okay. Thank you very much, Themistoklis. A small gift from the Greek community. And good luck in Adelaide tomorrow. Hope to see you all both next Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for coming tonight.